Hey, welcome to episode 5 of Foggy with a Chance of Seagulls. My name is Clark Weininger. I'm joined by my co-host Evan Lindsay. In today's episode, we talk about the past week of Giants baseball, some of the recent struggles, especially offensively for the Giants, and how we plan on addressing that at the trade deadline. We also talk about a few other trade deadline rumors before getting into a conversation about Giants broadcasters. I also went to the Sacramento Rivercats game. So we'll start by talking about some of my observations from last night's Rivercats game. I hope you enjoy.
Clark, you just went to a Rivercats game. For people who don't know about the Rivercats, that's one of the Giants' minor league affiliates. So it's the AAA team, the level before the Giants. I still associate the Rivercats with the A's, but a few years back, the Grizzlies in Fresno and the Rivercats, I think, switched around or something. And so now we have the Rivercats.
For Fresno. Yeah, tough beat for Fresno. They're now single A for the Rockies. But
for the Rockies, rough.
Yeah, and the A's are in Las Vegas. No, they didn't move yet. Their AAA team is the Las Vegas Aviators, I want to say. But yeah, so when they moved over there, Giants took over Sacramento, which works very nicely for us.
Yeah, real nice. Yeah, who did you see?
I saw our best hitting prospect, Marco Luciano, shortstop from the Dominican Republic, 21 years old, I think he is. We signed him as a 16-year-old, so it's been kind of a long road, but he's been a stud at every level he's played at. The numbers don't look great in Double-A. He started the season a little late, is batting something like 220 or something, but from everything I've read, his at-bats are really good. He just kind of perpetually finds himself in 3-2 counts, working really good at bats, hitting for power. I've also heard his batting practice power is unreal. So when he makes his debut, I really suggest folks, if they go to games, try to get there early and watch him hit batting practice. That's less of a thing, though, now, Evan, going early to batting practice.
Yeah, well, definitely for me, if you tuned into previous episodes, I'm trying to not get hit in the head with the ball. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. That was always for me, like, minus that one episode where I did get hit with the ball. It was one of the fun parts of being at the ballpark. It kind of felt like you got a little bit of an inside look into things, but I don't know. I think things are just like more streamlined now of just like trying to get you in, try to get you out in this way, which I guess is good, but I miss it a little bit.
I think less guys are taking advantage of batting practice too. They have their own routines that's kind of removed from that. So, yeah. Anyway, interesting, but yeah, Marco Luciano made his debut in AAA about a week ago. And yeah, I didn't see any huge highlights from him. He made a nice play on a grounder at shortstop, took 2 walks. They were kind of pitching around him. He just kind of exemplified the hitting philosophy from so many of our veteran guys to me, which was the thing that really impressed me the most. Was he was just patient. He wasn't really hacking at anything. He was taking what the pitcher gave him. His third at bat, he was really patient in his first 2. His third at bat came up and he swung first pitch and he flew out to right field. Didn't have a great swing on it, but the approach was very intentional, and I came away impressed. And he's a big dude for a shortstop and is very athletic and just kind of carries himself like a big leaguer. So that was really fun.
Do you think that he sticks there at shortstop long term?
I'm more optimistic after watching him play than I have been. And the Giants have not moved him around at all. We also had Tyler Fitzgerald, who was our 3rd round pick in the 2020 draft. The 2020 draft being the one where we had Bailey 1st round, Schmidt 2nd round, and Kyle Harrison 4th round. So Fitzgerald, shortstop from Louisville. And we've been moving him all around the field. He's been in AAA for most of the year. He played 2nd last night. He's played a lot of 3rd. We've been playing him in center recently as well. I think he's played a little left field too. So we're really, I think, paying attention. And you shouted him out in our last episode, Roger Munter, who has the Substack
Mhm.
There Are Giants, really goes in depth about the Giants minor league system and does really good analysis. But I think one of the things I've learned from him is pay attention to the way Giants deploy their prospects because
Mm.
they're getting them ready for the big leagues. A few days before even Schmidt made his debut with the Giants, he was playing second base for the first time in AAA. And
Mm.
they were trying to see how he would play defensively around the diamond. And that's his calling card. And that's what's kept him up in the big leagues despite some offensive struggles, which we'll get to later. Um, but yeah, I also saw Keaton win. Um, he pitched 3 innings, looked really good. I still believe he's our third or fourth best starter right now. Um,
I don't know. I wonder. Obviously, our bullpen is so good, and that's why we're kind of doing this. But I like you'd mentioned that he had pitched like 3 innings or something, and so it's like, one, are these guys going to get stretched out ever to like be starters or given the opportunity to like try it? It just feels like, I don't know, that feels like a little bit of a barrier to me in terms of like, Win right now is like in the same place that I felt like Webb was a few years back, of just kind of like, doesn't feel like doesn't feel like he can fully hack it, but it's also like we haven't seen him try fully yet either. And so I don't know, I kind of feel like that's the place that Win is at, and I think that we're at a place where, you know, I don't know. I know we're going to talk about trade deadline a little bit later, but it feels like, why not try Win out there? Why not try Luciano out there? Why not try Rama? Like, it's just like we have holes that could be filled internally. So like, why not see what we have there? But I just kind of feel like he feels blocked by just like all the players that are like him on the roster, and it's not so much about his talent level or anything, as far as I can tell. But
yeah, I completely agree. I 2 points to that. The first, the Tacoma Rainiers, who the Rivercats were playing, Seattle's AAA team, their
mhm.
starter went 8 innings through 100 pitches last night. So it's very clear that this is a philosophy by the Giants that's unique to other teams. This kind of 3 to 5 innings, but we only threw 4 pitchers, and it was 3 innings, 3 innings, 2 innings, 1 inning, kind of the relievers
Mhm.
and starters. So interesting pitching philosophy. The other point though is Keaton Wynn is blocked by just a train of mediocrity right now in the Giants starting rotation and like
Yeah.
middle or like long relief. Um, we've got Webb and Cobb, who are all stars, or in Webb's case, should be an all star. He had a
Yeah.
really rough outing yesterday, but
Let's not talk
otherwise,
about it.
I completely agree. Otherwise, has been really good this year. But we have Alex Wood, Anthony DeSclafani, Ross Stripling, Sean Manaea. You could even throw Jacob Junis in there.
Yeah.
I think Junis has minor league options potentially, but Wood, DeSclafani, Stripling, and Manaea, we can't send them down without releasing them. That's just a funny quirk to the way baseball rosters are set up. Once you've established yourself in the major leagues, you can't be sent down to AAA unless you're hurt and on a rehab assignment. So Wynn and Tristan Beck, who's been really good for us too, they're in this really interesting place where they have to be these AAA starters and they're overqualified to be. And I think they should both be at least bullpen arms for us. But in Keaton Wynn's case, I
Yeah.
think he's a legit starter. And I imagine Farhan and Gabe are kind of like, could one of these veteran guys have a back injury for a week? Like, could we just put him on the IL so we can bring up Keaton?
Yeah.
Um, but I think, as you mentioned, this is an area for us to explore at the trade deadline. So,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. I think I want to get back into that too later. You did text me last night, Ramos walk-off homer, so I do want to hear about that and how our
yeah.
boy Joey B is doing too.
So, yeah, I was really impressed with Elliot Ramos's at bats too. Kind of classic though, where he earlier in the game smoked a liner that like went right to the second baseman. One hop, got thrown out at first, but it hit it like 107 miles per hour off the bat. Um, and then it was a really low scoring game, which is uncommon for the Pacific Coast League. But yeah, he came up bottom of the ninth, tied 2-2, and kind of looked like a fastball, might have been a cut, maybe a slider right at the knees, and just roped it into left field.
Mm.
And it was a no doubter. As soon as that came off the bat, you knew it was out, and we all jumped up, and everyone was celebrating. And it was fireworks night, so everyone was happy that we could see the fireworks quickly and get out of there quickly too. Um, but yeah, I was impressed with Elliott. He made a really weird play. First play of the game was like a weird, like sliced looper into left field, and he just didn't really run to it. I don't know if you saw there was a play that Randy Arozarena had against the Orioles earlier this week where I think Gunnar Henderson's the one who hit it for the Orioles. Just like lofted one to left field, and he turned it into a triple because Randy didn't really try very hard on the ball. It's very similar with Ramos. So to start the game, I was not super pleased with him because that cost us a run, but
Yeah,
made up
I
for
feel
it
like
by hitting a walk off.
it reminds me of the Reds a little bit too. Like Cole and Alex were talking on Giants Talk about like that. You know, the Reds just like play with this kind of like sense of abandon or something, this like youthful, just like whatever. And it
Mm-hmm.
kind of reminds me of like, I don't know, like a Jordan Poole or something. Do you know what I mean? It's just like you're
It's a
playing
funny
so
comparison, yeah.
frenetically, and it's like sometimes you're doing too much and sometimes you're doing not enough, and it's just like not finding that consistency. And it kind of feels like that's what has held Ramos back, because clearly there's raw tools there, but it just kind of like putting it together consistent, like stringing together consistent outings every day or something. I don't know.
Yeah. On the other hand, you asked about Joey Bart. I am very low on him after watching him yesterday. He has
Mm,
really bad body language, really bad energy, and I think that's very understandable. His job was stolen from him
yeah.
by a first round pick by this organization, and I think he needs a fresh start potentially. I still
Mm,
deep down, once we keep Sable on the roster for this year, I think Sable's more of an outfielder and third catcher, and I
mm-hmm.
think there's a line for Joey to be the uh, the backup catcher or platoon catcher against lefties. But man, he did not look very good last night. So
Mm.
he might just be in his head. I mean, he probably knows there's no shot for him to be up in the big leagues this year unless someone gets hurt. But that was unfortunate to see.
Yeah. Well, I mean, with Bailey too, it's like, you know, we joke that we talk about him every week, but it's just, I think he came up and just so quickly looked so comfortable, which I think is just
Yeah,
something that Joey never had. Even when he came up and had little moments, it was like, this guy can hit, but it was like, it, there's like a completeness to Bailey's game that doesn't feel there, that it's there with Bart. And like, even when, you know, Bailey's average goes down, continues to go down, and like he's not hitting 300 and stuff too, he just is bringing value because it's that field general thing. He's playing defense. He's framing. He can throw people out. He just feels like he belongs there, and that's kind of an intangible that like you just have to like feel that in your bones that you belong at the major league level. And it's I think that's a it can be a hard thing to do when like you taste it multiple times, as Joey has had, you know, these opportunities to like step up, and he just doesn't he keeps missing out. And like I think that would be for me mentally wearing me down a little bit to like still try to show up and want to be the backup catcher to Bailey is
right.
like, I think it's a spiritually hard thing. And so yeah, I don't know if I think that he does have a role on this team, but I don't know if he's long for this organization, to be honest with you, but maybe that's an overreaction. I'm not sure.
Yeah. So the trade deadline's coming up August 1st. I think we may record one more episode before then, and so there will be more rumors. But I think
Yes.
this is as good a time as any to talk about some of the improvements that need to be made. And I think, Joey Bart being a former first round pick, catchers are so valuable, and he's still a very good defensive catcher, I think, or
Hmm.
at least has the potential to be. Um, I do think we could get something in return for him. Um, as we noted a little bit in the last episode, the Giants took two catchers in this recent draft. We took two catchers the draft before it. We are very much trying to win with depth at the catcher position. And I think
Mhm.
that's a very smart play, but I think also is writing on the wall that Joey Bart might not be long for this organization. So we could, trade him potentially. I don't really see much of a market for Ramos given some of his big league struggles.
Yeah.
I would be devastated if we traded Luciano or even Harrison. Um, but we have, I think, our farm system's at a place that's so much more appealing than it's been
Yeah.
in years past. So the deadline's
Yeah.
therefore, I think, more interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you always hear front office executives talk about that it's, this last week going into the trade deadline is hugely important because it, seeing how other teams are doing, how your team's doing, where you kind of stand. And, um, obviously it's easy as a fan of a team to like overreact to like the thing that just happened. But for me, I a little bit wonder with this team, like it feels like a postseason team, but it feels like we're not going to get too far this year. Just realistically, to me, like it's the offense isn't that it's literally like all the numbers are it's a dead league average offense. Like our bullpen is our strength, but like even if you bring in like I know that Verlander has come up on the rumor mill, but like I don't think that moves the needle enough to like part with like really marquee prospects. But um and like even something crazy like bringing a Shohei to the Giants is like that doesn't even make sense because it's like we're leveraging our future to push in the chips this year, which just doesn't feel like the strong play
Yeah.
to me. And I mean it's important for like the team on the field to you know to give. There's going to be some deals to be made, but I I'm more in the camp of like I think doing some little middle infield help, a little starting pitching help, but like we're talking like Michael Lorenzen, not Verlander to me. But I don't know,
Yeah.
maybe the next week changes, but it just doesn't feel like I don't know, the consistency isn't there for this team for me right now.
I think what's interesting about the Verlander rumor is that he has such a massive deal with the Mets. And I don't know. I mean, Steve Cohen is a multi billionaire, so maybe he doesn't care about giving 43 million to Verlander and Scherzer, which that's crazy. 86
It's
million for two pitchers
insane.
is crazy. And I think there's a reality where he looks at this and goes, "This is not a team that's going to win this year, and we need to retool for next year because if we're not good next year, Mets fans are going to be at my throat." And
Yeah.
so I think with Verlander's deal being that high, if we take on money, then we won't have to give up big prospects. I think it's either the Mets fit the bill and they just want to get rid of him
Mm-hmm.
so they can get some prospects,
Sure.
or we could send, a guy like DeSclafani who's on the last year of his deal, or um, Wood also on the last year of his deal. Stripling and Mania have a player option for next year, which if you've watched them pitch this year, they will absolutely be picking up those player options next year. They're not getting 12 million on the open market with their performance this year.
Yeah.
But I think Verlander, I think this makes sense in the avenue of not giving up your prospects. Actually, Justin Verlander is this big name, so you kind of think that it'll be this big prospect haul. But with his contract, and I can pull it up right now, it's 43 million for this year, 43 million for next year, and a $35 million player option if he reaches 140 innings pitched next season. So the Giants would be on the hook for a considerable amount of money on this deal. Or the Mets could, again, Steve Cohen, billionaire, could go, sure, I'll pay his contract, but we want our fourth best prospect. And they would
Mm-hmm.
probably either want a pitching prospect and maybe I mean, they have enough hitters. I think they would be more interested in retooling with some pitchers. I don't know if that would be Kyle Harrison, if that would be more that next tier of starters for us, which is Mason Black, Landon Roop. Many of the people listening to this are like, those are fake names. They probably are.
Agree.
Don't fact check me. No. But I think it wouldn't require our top prospect necessarily. So I'm
Yeah.
interested to see that rumor as it comes around. I've seen Marcus Stroman floated as well. He's on the last year of his deal with the Cubs, I believe. Although, actually, no. I think he has a similar deal to that of Carlos Rodon last year, where he has a player option based on innings pitched, which he's already met, I believe.
Hmm.
But yeah, any other starters or what other positions too intrigue you at the deadline?
I mean, yeah, like we talked about, I think middle infield is an area to look at, which is why I'd want to run Luciano out there personally, or Fitzgerald, or just somebody, just like see what we have. But yeah, I think he's had his moments, but Crawford hasn't, really brought consistency this year. Tyro's hurt. Wisely and Schmidt, it's like you can't be running both of those guys out there at the same time. I think that they have a role on this team, but it's like they're a little overextended currently. So
And there's
I
a
think
lot
you
of
definitely,
overlap between them. It's like
yeah,
defense but weak bat, and kind
exactly.
of have one, not the other.
Yeah, and like um, it's just there's only so many 0 for 9s you can take at the bottom of the lineup, like day to day, and so I think I don't know. Grant had discussed old pal Matt Duffy. That's interesting that he is still in the majors. Like seeing like Derek Law last week, and then Duffy's is still out there and like doing things, and
Yeah,
it's
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 crazy
funny to
because it's
see.
like 2014 was not that long ago, but it was actually a long time ago.
It was a long time ago.
Um,
I mean, who's on the Giants still from 2014?
Craw,
Crawford.
that's
That's
it.
it.
Yeah,
And so I don't know. I think Duffy is interesting because he brings something, but it's more a vibe thing or whatever that I think that would like placate the fans who like
but he's
probably
also
want
a
more.
veteran. You know,
Yeah.
he's a reliable veteran. He can play multiple positions. I don't think
Yeah.
we would. The concern for me is I don't think he can play shortstop at this point in his career, but he can play third and second really
Yeah.
well. Um, Good base runner, can hit a little bit. It was interesting. I went to one of the Royals games when they were here the first weekend of the season, and the
Hmm.
two biggest ovations an opening day weekend for us were Crawford and Matt Duffy. And
Mm.
Matt Duffy was on the other team. And that was such an indictment of our team for me in that moment. And since then, we've brought up Bailey, we've brought up Schmidt, we brought up Matos. There's this real like energy in the
Yeah.
ballpark now because of the young guys and just the performance. I mean, winning is more fun, frankly.
Yeah.
But I do think bringing in Matt Duffy would be, like you said, it be vibes. But like I think there's something to be said for vibes and a veteran who fills a hole that we kind of have right now.
Yeah. I think and I think too, just like with the deadline, it's I'm learning with this front office to like temper my expectations of like what is going to be happening at the deadline. I think that we're still we're getting better as a team, and I think just the whole holistically of the whole organization, everything is on the right track. But we're still in this period where it's like, do you push in all your chips? Do you like? I think if we were, at 500, I think there would maybe be like maybe like it's like we're not that far off from being on either side of the coin in things in my mind, and so because the Giants like have payroll flexibility and they're like a bigger market team, I think that a lot of names get connected, but I'm trying to not be too caught up in that or whatever. It's like they're gonna do whatever they're gonna do. And I think there's one this kind of tangentially related, but um I was hearing or reading something about how like we had talked about this a few weeks ago, but um I think the Giants check in on a lot of people. I mean, all organizations kind of have to do their due diligence, but I think the Giants really do. They look at a lot of different options. Like I had either read or heard that that we were making a run at Bellinger this past offseason, and that we had been trying to make a deal for Sean Murphy too, which we have talked about as well, which like always thought that's maybe something they should have considered, and now it seems like maybe it worked out fine. But I think that they're looking at a lot of different options, but ultimately it feels like it's on the side of due diligence rather than like we're necessarily going to be like actually pulling the plug, especially this year, I think too.
Yeah, I see that. I personally disagree. I saw something online this week, and actually, I think Carrie Crowley, when filling in for Grant on the Athletics podcast, talked about how every year Farhan has had a team that has, been in the playoff mix and has, been one of the better teams in baseball. They've made a big splash at the deadline. So with the Dodgers in 2017 and 2018, they grabbed Machado for 2 months. They didn't end up keeping him. They grabbed Darvish. They didn't end up keeping him. And then in 2021, we grabbed Bryant with no intention of keeping him either. So I think there is precedent for us to, when there's smoke, there's fire. When we have a team that the front office believes in, that they're willing to put the chips down and sign a difference maker. So I think that's where the Verlander thing intrigues me a little bit. But
Yeah,
I don't know. This team is so hot and cold. If we had recorded on Monday of last week, we would have been like, or Tuesday after
right.
the basically the fake doubleheader win against the Reds. We had won
Yeah.
5 straight coming out of the break. We had won 7 straight if you count the 2 games before the All-Star break. And then since then we haven't won a game. And it's just like these wild streaks in either direction. And it's hard to really understand what this team is. But I still believe that this is a playoff team. Even if we don't make any deadline deals, I think having a bullpen that's as good as ours, having a closer that's, I mean, Camilo is a stud.
Yeah.
And we also have talked about that. I think we might have to rename this podcast the Patrick Bailey and Camilo Duvall fan clubs because we talk about them so much, but they're just so, they're difference makers, plain and simple. So I think
Yeah.
when we have the foundation of a team, I'm interested to see what we can do at the deadline. But I
Yeah.
also
No. Yeah,
am,
me too. I
wary of it.
think it's just interesting to kind of hear like at least the public what they're saying in the press is like that Farhan's like, we believe in our guys that we have in the rotation and blah 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 and all this stuff. And like obviously he's not going to come out and say the opposite of that. It's like Stripling sucks from an eye. Do you know what I mean? Like
But you
he's not
can
going to
read
say
through
that.
the lines. Yeah, you can read through the lines of public comments too, I feel like.
Yeah, totally. But I guess it's my thing is like with the starting rotation, it's like you need 2 more guys, and those can be one of those can be internal. But it's just like these stretches I think happen because it's like your best pitchers are going to have bad games, right? Like as Webb showed yesterday, and so it's like that's going to happen. So it's like when it's the rotation is a black hole after Cobb and Webb, then it's like we're going to get these stretches of just like multiple days of whatever, and then when the plan works and you do the Beck and the win thing and blah blah blah, it's great. But I think too, there's something I've been a little bit worried about is our usage of Camilo as well. Is like I think it's well warranted, but I don't think it's sustainable going into the postseason because I think he could be like one of those like Andrew Miller types that you can put into whatever situation. But I'm obviously this is very pseudoscience based in my mind, but I think he throws incredibly fast. He used to have a delivery that was much slower so that he could recover in between pitches, but now that doesn't exist for him. And then we're going to trot him out there, and he right now he's on pace to challenge for like the single season saves record for the Giants. And I just think magic runs out sometimes. Like obviously he's a different player now than he was, in that Dodgers Giants series in the playoffs a few years ago. But at the same time, I don't know. He's a human being, and like it's we even the best players look at like Shohei Ohtani. He's been having a little rough stretch of like pitching stuff happening on the pitching side lately. And it's just like that's gonna happen in a baseball season. So it's like I think that depth is really important. So it's like it's like being like Webb and Cobb and then I don't know. It's like it's not a recipe for success for me. But I think if we can get one of our guys going internally and like cement them in a role and then bring in one more guy, that feels good. And I think it sets us up to like try to see if we can find that groove that we had in June again.
Yeah, I agree. And I think to the Camilo point, we just got Luke Jackson off the IL. I think he is in that Rogers twins and Doval grouping that is the late inning relievers. And I think having him maybe, if he can be firing on all cylinders, Brebby is coming back in August, it looks like. Having some of our better leverage relievers back, I think takes the burden off of Camilo down the stretch, hopefully. So, but he's a stud. I mean, that game Monday night, he saved the suspended game that resumed in the 8th inning, and he got the save in the 10th. And then just a few hours later, we win. Was that the 11-10 game? The second
it
of
might
the
have been.
doubleheader?
Yeah, I think so.
Or the fake doubleheader. But
lost,
yeah, and then he
we lost the
got
couple
that,
too, the last two.
Right. So then he gets the save. So he got 2 saves in one day. But then the nice thing is we've lost every game since, so he hasn't had to pitch. So
Yeah.
So, some of the streakiness does play to an advantage, I guess, in that respect. But yeah, it's an interesting team to evaluate. So
yeah, I'm interested to see what's going on this next week. Who are we playing in this next week?
We've got the A's and Red Sox, I believe, at home. First time we're at home since the Rockies series before the All-Star break. So I think the team is ready for some home cooking. We're getting some of the guys back hopefully soon. I think a big one, though, is getting Tyro back is just so big for this team. The offense that he has out of second base, his defense has been amazing this year. Just having more regular at-bats for him over Schmidt and Wisely.
Yeah.
And then figuring out what to do. I think August 12th is when he's eligible to come off the IL. Or
gotcha.
Maybe he's already eligible, but I think August 12th is what I've seen reported. Which is not that long. I mean, I think, yeah. And you mentioned it already, but, Luciano is in AAA. He is one step away now. It took Matos and Bailey like 2 weeks in AAA before the front office went, all right, they can help the big league squad.
Yeah.
So maybe a week or two. I mean, frankly, this week here is huge. If Luciano has an impressive week, maybe they don't address the middle infield. Maybe he's the solution. I mean, that would be quite the turnaround. But your point earlier was that I think is the best case scenario, right? Like, if he is brought up and can show something, I mean, he's better than Matt Duffy, right? Like, or at least the potential for him is way better.
Higher.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I think too, it's like, it's hard to know who's gonna work and who's gonna pan out. But even though it's tough to watch sometimes, I think like having Schmidt get like an extended look at the major league level, when we're such a player development focused organization, like feels worthwhile to me. And so I'd love to see like that's I guess my thing with this year. It's like I want to be competitive, but I also feel like we're kind of teeing up 2024, 2025 to like be really like making a push in a different way. And so I don't know. I just loved. I mean, we've established that we're willing to promote quick if people feel like they can contribute. So I don't know. I'd love to see what goes on. And speaking of promoting quickly, I think if you turn on a Giants game in the past few years, you'll notice a lot of new announcers and broadcasters. And so maybe that's something we can touch on here at the end of the episode.
Yeah. And I think we were just talking about the Red Series, but Giants broadcasters got some more national publicity this week because of the rain delay, the suspended game that I was referring to before. If you haven't seen it, I don't know if we can clip it, but
let's put it in right here.
Someone else get eaten by the tarp?
Oh, look out.
Oh, God. Gotta move.
Close.
High stepping.
Oh, boy, there we go.
Mayday.
Oh, no.
He got eaten by the tarp.
He's under there.
They're not even stopping. No pause.
Somebody's going to
Every
get him
man
out of
left
there.
behind.
Crawl.
He's under there somewhere.
This is like basic
We
training.
lost him.
Dave Fleming and Hunter Pence were trying to make it interesting, make it compelling theater during the rain delay, and caught the grounds crew falling under the tarp, and it went viral. A friend of mine sent it to me who is not a Giants fan, and was like, "Oh my God, this is hilarious," and told me to put it in the podcast. So shouts to Rachel. Here, this one's for you. But yeah, I mean, we're used to growing up. I mean, it's been the same broadcasting crew since we were kids, and those guys are getting older. So, but yeah, yeah, you want to talk about who the old guys were?
Well, I mean, yeah. So if you're not a Giants fan, we are extremely blessed. I think a lot of I think somewhat begrudgingly is my perception. A lot of even national publications do agree that we have like one of the best crews in the majors. Obviously, Krug and Kipe, Mike Krukow, and Dwayne Kuiper are old Giants players that have been in the booth for a long time. I think they're probably like the fan favorites ultimately. And then, but you can't sleep on Dave Fleming and John Miller, who are both non-player broadcasters, but Fleming feels very much like, I don't know, he has his own flair, but like comes from that OG old school John Miller, Vince Scully kind of thing, I feel. And
the storytelling, the like play-by-play, just kind of has a feel for how to insert a story here, but then call the balls and strikes, accurately and helpfully.
And he is kind of doing what John Miller did like a while ago in his career, where he was like being called to do a lot of ESPN games and different. And Fleming even does different sports and the football and golf.
He's
and
really good
blah,
at
basketball
too. Yeah,
which is crazy, but it's nice to know that like there's a young guy in the crew that will kind of keep a thread of like just a familiar voice in the booth. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm kind of interested to hear what you think of like who you like of the guys that we've been trying out. It's a lot of players too, because I'm not watching as many games all the way through these days. I kind of get little clips here and there, but be interested to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. So right now on the road, Krug and Kipe aren't traveling. Mike Krukow, I can't remember what his health issue is right now, but he
has like a cane, and
he has very limited mobility, so he's only doing home games right now. And Kipe, because they're best friends, because they're tied at the hip, kind of as a broadcasting duo. Kipe isn't traveling on the road either, and he's up there in age too, and I think it's nice for him to get a break throughout the season as well. But
and he had his own health
Fleming
troubles,
and he did right. So right now it's been Fleming and John Miller, although Miller has taken off a few road series as well, and then it's been a rotating kind of cast of. To me, it almost feels like people auditioning to be the full-time guys when Krug and Kipe ultimately retire, and John Miller's around their same age. He feels kind of like Vin Scully, though, that he's going to be a broadcaster till the day he dies.
It's like kicks the
But
bucket, yeah.
yeah,
Literally.
but and God, he's
And
still
he'll be
so
like,
good.
and they're lowering me down to the casket. What a beautiful, like, he would have a mic in his hand in the
And
ground.
he would be describing his own,
mortality and the existence of man and all this stuff.
So well said. But yeah, so the new guys have been Hunter Pence, who Giants fans I'm sure are familiar with. Javi Lopez, also part of those World Series teams. Sean Estes, who was a starter when we were kids, late 90s, early 2000s. Great lefty, who's been doing these broadcasts a little bit longer than Hunter and Javi. FP Santangelo, who's also on those early Giants teams. He was the Nationals broadcaster for a while. And he does radio on KMBR and the occasional road series. And then Joe Rizzo, who's the San Jose Giants play-by-play guy that has been getting called up to the big leagues here and there. So that's been fun. As my buddy Tucker once said, we were at a San Jose Giants game, and he was like, this guy has the most Brockmire voice of anyone I've ever heard. So his voice can be kind of that, like, almost trying too hard to sound like an old-timey broadcaster, but he has really good knowledge of the game, and I've enjoyed him on the radio. But yeah, for the most part, it's been Javi and Pence and Javi and Dave and Pence and Dave and Javi Lopez. And I think both of them are really good, offer that insight as a former player, have the kind of camaraderie with some of the guys in the clubhouse still. Pence is a little bit wilder, which I'm sure doesn't surprise anyone. He's he's got a lot of energy, and I really think exactly. He's got a lot of energy and is really fun on the broadcast. And then Javi just has such a professional voice. He sounds like a veteran at this point, and I've really enjoyed. He and Dave kind of sound alike, so when they're doing a broadcast together, it's just like one person talking to himself, but well,
Smeagol vibes.
Exactly.
No, I feel like with like that tarp clip, it's like I think it's like it's what we were talking about earlier of like with prospects. It's like, it's like it's this feeling that you can do this job, but you have to like believe that you belong there too, I think. And I think that there's kind of like I don't know, I don't want to presume anything, but I feel like there's probably like some degree of imposter syndrome when you like step into the booth with
has to be
4 legends of broadcasting. Do you know what I mean? And like, especially like going from a player role to being in the booth, like it's a natural transition, but you got to like feel comfortable, like just being yourself there. Because I think like that's the thing with Joe Rizzo that you're kind of like touching on is like sometimes it feels a little like disingenuous or something, the way that he presents it, but like obviously underneath it, it's a very knowledgeable baseball mind. All of these people are. And so like with that clip, the tarp clip, Pence was better in that than he had been, I think, previously when they first started putting him on games, because even on games, or like he would do some stuff for NBC Bay Area, and it was like there's this kind of like this stilted way that he would talk, kind of a little bit like he's a weird guy, so he talks in a weird cadence, but there just feels to me a little bit more comfort from him. I think Javi's felt pretty comfortable since he started doing it. Estes I think is fine. FP, I remember him from back in the day, but I don't really have an opinion about him. But I think Pence and Javi feel like the ones that like definitely will stick around, and then I think there's always like games that need to be filled in here and there and whatnot. But I feel like the future's in good hands with them. I feel like, I agree, and everybody else too.
I totally agree.
Thank you so much for joining us on another episode of Foggy with a Chance of Seagulls. If you haven't already, please follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcasts. We have a video version available on YouTube. Follow us on Instagram for little clips that we'll be putting up every week. And it actually really helps if you leave us ratings, reviews, comments, anything. It all helps. Thank you for listening so much, and we'll see you next week.